welcome back to MalStorm Gaming. My name is Malachi Gardner, and today I'm going to be reviewing Darklands, the newest expansion for the card drafting game Enchanters. So, I've already done a playthrough of the Darklands expansion using kingdom decks and villages from that expansion, so if you'd like to go check that out, I would definitely recommend you do so, and it'll be linked to this video in the upper corner. So if you'd like to go ahead and watch that and get a feel for how the game actually plays, and specifically with the new expansion, definitely recommend that. But this video is going to be my thoughts on the expansion after playing it several more times on my own. And so, what is in the expansion? 6 new kingdom decks, along with the corresponding classes, banners, village cards, and overlords that go along with each of those. So you have 6 more of everything. So 6 more banners, 6 more classes, 6 more overlords, and everything that you could want. So that is a nice chunk of content that you can incorporate into your Enchanters game, and it does fit quite nicely in the new big Enchanters storage box that's on my shelf up there that you are able to get with the ultimate pledge for Enchanters. So that is good to know. Even if you sleeve your cards, you're still able to fit it inside of the Enchanters storage box. So very nice there. So that's just a little bit about what the expansion is. So starting off, my thoughts here on this expansion is kind of a mixed thing, but to me personally it leans a little more negative, and that is that the expansion, while having some really cool kingdoms, which I'll get to in a little bit, doesn't really add anything new to the experience, where each of the previous 3 expansions have all added in some new element to the game in addition to adding in more kingdoms. This expansion just has more kingdoms. So, you know, the Overlords expansion added in Overlords as a mechanic where it's like a boss you can fight against as you're playing through the game competitively, and then the Odyssey expansion added in new cooperative game modes, and then asymmetric starting powers, and a bunch of cool stuff there, and then the prior East Quest expansion added in the quests and some cool stuff there. This expansion doesn't have anything like that. It's just more of the same. So it's building upon what the other expansions have added into the game, having more of the overlords and classes and banners, but it doesn't actually add anything of its own to the mix. So I think that's something you should definitely know when considering whether or not to pick this up. You know, it's not going to change your overall experience. It's going to give you some really cool new cards to play with, and a spoiler, it's really fun. I like the expansion, but I think it's good to note that you're not getting any new mechanics. You're not really going to be changing up the rules of the game at all for this expansion. So nothing new is really going to be introduced in the expansion other than just some new cards, which is really cool. Which is still really cool, but unlike the other expansions, this one does not add on any new mechanics or game modes that you can add into your game. Now, that said, moving on to, what is essentially just more of the same with the new kingdoms and their corresponding cards. This has a lot of really cool stuff in it. So as you can probably tell by the box art, the Darklands expansion is very much inspired off of classic fairy tale monsters. So, we have your vampires and werewolves and witches, the wood folk, and then the trolls and ghosts. So a bunch of really cool, iconic, different monsters in there. And that's really cool. And the way they really developed each one of those is really neat. And most of them have their own little twist that they really focus on that is really unique. So, for example, the werewolves have a moon cycle token. So it'll either be a new moon or a full moon, and different cards will get buffed or nerfed based off of which one of those is the current face-up side. So it's kind of like the Desert Storm token from the Mummies, but it's going to be flipping over a lot, and it's going to be changing how your cards work. So you might have some silver that will give you benefits during the new moon, but then you'll have some werewolf monsters that will get more powerful during the full moon. And that was really fun, and I really enjoyed that mechanic there of trying to figure out, okay, I want to pick this monster, but he's going to do a ton of damage. But if I can figure out a way of flipping the moon token to the new moon side, then my silver enchantment will give me 4 additional defense. So if I can figure out a way of flipping that token over, then I can defeat this monster without taking any wounds. So that sort of element there was really fun in the game. I really enjoyed the werewolf faction there. And then you have the trolls, which are all about the journey track, and so they're all about skipping over different cards on the journey track and getting rewards for that. So there's some monsters that when you skip them, you'll be able to heal. And when you skip them on the journey track, you'll be able to heal some damage or gain some gems, or you have enchantments that will give you more gems every time you skip an item or enchantment, and that can stack. So if you pick, some of the more expensive cards, you'll be able to trigger multiple of these abilities, and that was really cool. And I enjoy, kingdoms like the centaurs and the trolls that really focus in on the journey track, because that's a really interesting, element to this game. So really honing in on that is very fun. So that's the trolls. Those are really cool. The next faction is the woodfolk, which those are really neat because a lot of their cards give you bonuses if you have the least of something. So if you have the fewest items, you get +2 attack. If you have the fewest attack, you get +3 attack. If you have the fewest monsters defeated, then you get some bonuses. If you have the fewest gems, you get some more gems. All sorts of different things that reward you for having the least of something. So it's definitely the catch-up mechanic faction, which is really cool. If someone's in the lead, you can take some of these cards from this kingdom and then get right back into the game. I will say with this one, with the Woodfolk Kingdom, it does not really function that well against the Automa if you're playing solo, due to the fact that there's no other players who have fewer items than. So that didn't work super well playing against that, but you can play the faction with the cooperative boss battle or game mode where you can play solo two-handed. And that was really cool, playing them in that game mode, because it's cooperative, right? And so you have your two hands, your two different characters with their weapons. And it was really neat because you get rewarded for having less of something than someone else. So you could make strategic decisions like, okay, I want to spend, I want my first player to spend some gems, so then they'll have fewer gems than the other player, and then he gets some buffs. And then on the other person's turn, I want to spend some more gems, so that then that player has fewer gems. So always trying to balance out their gems, the amount of gems you have, to make sure that whoever's turn it is currently has fewer gems than the other player, or figuring out ways of getting less attacks so you can get a buff. That was all really cool, and I really enjoyed that. That was a nice twist, and I like the sort of catch-up mechanic type feel to that. And then you have the ghosts, which are really focused on enchantments, right? So items aren't super useful to ghosts, but enchantments can work still. So a lot of their cards will require you to ignore your item cards, but then double your enchantments, which that's really neat. So you can really build up a lot of good enchantments that you don't really care if you can't use your items because your enchantments are doubled. That's really neat. So I thought those were cool. And then you have the witches, which have a stack of frogs that come with them. And frogs are monsters, and they have 1 attack and 1 health, give you 1 point, but you can discard them to gain 1 gem. So there's some misses there, but the Witch Kingdom cards and monsters are going to be changing all sorts of cards into frogs. And so you might have someone who has a big monster that's worth 10 points, and then you turn them into a frog that's worth 1 point. That sort of thing, which I found pretty cool. And then if you're playing against the Witch Overlord, that'll be turning your cards into frogs as well. And then the other thing that the witches do is actually giving you benefits for putting your cards, putting weapons, items, monsters, and enchantments inside the graveyard. So actually which really combos well with the frogs, because you can discard a frog to get 1 gem, and then all of your effects that trigger whenever you discard a monster then trigger. So that was kind of a neat thing as well, which is fun to play around with. And so all 5 of those kingdoms I really enjoyed, and they all had their own twist that felt really unique compared to all of the other factions, which I think there's some close to like 30 kingdoms at this point. So there's a ton of kingdoms in the game, but all 5 of those felt incredibly unique and different from all the other kingdoms. Now, there are 6 kingdoms in the expansion. The last one, the vampires, I found to be a little bit underwhelming and not as unique. They really focus in on wounds, which makes sense thematically for vampires. And so as you're playing with them, you're going to be getting a lot of cards will be giving you wounds. So there's a stake card that is an item that when you take it, you can give it to another player and they will take 5 damage, but they'll permanently get 1 additional attack. So, it's got some pluses and minuses there, and I did like that. In some cards like that, I did enjoy because there is a benefit to, getting 1 extra attack, but then you're losing 5 points. Unless you can heal those wounds, which might make it worth it. So if you use the Coffin card, that will allow you to heal whenever you get that. So there's some really interesting cards in the faction, but ultimately, the whole concept of just having a faction built around getting wounds and distributing wounds has already been done in this game. With the Dark Elves, they really focused in on getting wounds and distributing wounds to everybody. So having the vampires do the same thing feels a little bit less interesting, but they're still fun to play with. So I wouldn't, object to playing with any of these factions, but, the vampires are the least unique when compared to the other, 30-plus factions that are already in the game. But that said, all 6 of them are still very fun to play with. And then, of course, all of the classes and banners and villages and overlords all really tie nicely into what that faction does. So the overlord for the woodfolk gives you, he is weakened when you have the fewest of certain things. So I can't remember exactly what it is, but something like, he gets -2 attack if you have the fewest items, and then -2 health if you have the fewest enchantments. Or it might be reversed there, but he gets weaker if you have the fewest of different things. And so, everyone is vying to have the fewest items, so then they can get some sort of buff. But at the same time, if you have more items, you should be able to make up for the increase of stats there. But so, it still is interesting. And then, of course, the werewolf is really cool because she's going to be flipping the moon token constantly. Whenever anyone rests, the moon token is going to flip. And that was really cool because then you have your cards are going to be, all the cards are going to be changing in value very frequently, and then she's also going to be getting some extra stats when it is a full moon, of course, because it's a werewolf. So that was all really cool, and the classes and banners are all really neat. I really like those because you can really customize your starting experience based off of, your asymmetric power. So that was really cool. So ultimately, I did really enjoy the Darklands expansion, and would I recommend it? Yes, I would. I would recommend it to someone who has the ultimate pledge for Enchanters, has played all the expansions, and really enjoys the game, and just wants some more kingdoms. Because that's all you're getting. You're not getting any new game modes or anything like that, but you're getting a bunch of really cool new cards. So if you have Enchanters and you really like playing it, you've played it a lot, I would recommend getting it, but I wouldn't say it's a must-buy expansion for someone who only plays Enchanters every so often. Alright, so those are my thoughts on the Darklands expansion for Enchanters. If you are interested in checking it out, I believe you're still able to get some copies from the Mythic Games website and order it directly through them. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope it was helpful to you. If it was helpful, I would ask you to consider liking it and subscribing to MalStorm Gaming to see more content just like this. And until next time, happy gaming!